All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another London is Blue live stream, or if you're listening back on audio or watching back on YouTube later, a reaction podcast recorded right after we saw Chelsea decide to opt out of a top four race in the Premier League this season. May be some overblown reactions, may be some hot takes on this one, because at the end of the day, Chelsea losing to Manchester City away in a very bit of unceremonious fashion, as it were, after going up 1-0 very, very quickly, only to see chances missed, chances not taken. And now Chelsea are in sixth place in the Premier League, behind Newcastle, behind Man City, behind Forest, Arsenal, and Liverpool, and level on points with Bournemouth in seventh position. Just exactly how we thought we were going to draw it up this season, Nick, and not the match we wanted.
No, I mean, it's a huge missed opportunity. I mean, you're playing against a City team who's reeling, who has been shipping goals like crazy this season, who is playing a midfielder at right back, who's playing a debutant at center back and a debutant at left wing, and is a shell of a squad that they used to be because of injuries and poor squad management. And instead of asserting dominance and keeping a performance level up that you started with for the first 20 minutes, we have seen the same story over and over for the last month and a half, which is start very brightly, enjoy some really good moments, fail to put the game away, and lose or draw. Those are your two options there. So yeah, I mean, once City got the equalizer in the first half, I pretty much resigned myself to what this was going to become, and that's what it became.
Yeah, and as we kind of get into this one, Sam, we'll get to some three-row match reviews to get the temp check from the viewers or listeners. But, I mean, just in general, we thought that Chelsea could have a chance in this game. We did our preview pod, and it did seem like there was an opportunity to go up 2-0 very, very early on in this game, and would have changed the complete, I think, dynamic, would have put City in a position where they would have needed to be a little bit more kind of on their heels, and would have given maybe us an opportunity to capitalize, but just maybe it was not meant to be on the day. And I think we can point to errors across the players, the manager, and maybe even it starts the conversation about the sporting directors and the ownership again, about how involved that through line is from top to bottom on just setting up a team to be successful in the Premier League.
Well, I mean, you only had to look at midweek and see what the strategy was from PSG. They could smell blood, they could smell the rot. And how did they respond? They just gave it everything. And Pep said this in his press match, like his post-match comments, that they outdueled us, they outfought us, and they outran us. And we came with the exact opposite strategy, where it was just sitting back, allowing City to have all the time in the world. And when you are in a fight where you've swung and your debutant has made a mistake leading to a goal, you've given Pep and a title winning machine all the time they need to recover, catch their breath, and find the strategy that they need. It was so passive. It was just standing back and hoping that City, whatever they could throw at you, just didn't stick. And that's not what you do against Manchester City. So thoroughly disappointed. Contender for arguably worst performance of the season easily. I think Ipswich is sort of there, but
Number one.
just like the wrong
That's number
approach.
one, Sam.
Yeah, just I mean probably yeah. So mhm. Yeah, it's just total disappointment. I mean, you were given a head start, and it's like just falling and tripping over your heels and face planting on on concrete. It's just that bad. So got nothing to say, to be honest. Just disappointed.
And Nick, I think the first thing people want to talk about is the decision to continue to persevere with Robert. He's not getting the Bob treatment today. He is Robert Sanchez, because you get that full name treatment when you're in trouble. Just another one of those moments where, I mean, you looked at the fact that like the second goal, we were talking about that in our group chat, and it ultimately turned a chance that had a 0.03 XG into 0.42, which is just like, how can I be a magician of making terrible things happen for the team that pays me and that I play for? Robert Sanchez, the 2023 or 2024-25 story is effectively what we had a chance to see. Part of it is on the player. Part of it's also on the manager saying in the press conference, he's the guy, trying to give him some cover, which, we like when a manager tries to back their players and to give them confidence and to put them in a situation to be successful. This player is not putting anyone on this team in a position to be successful at this moment. This is effectively playing with a double agent in your side who is looking to figure out how they can sabotage you. That is where he's at right now.
That feels, as much as I don't want
too hyperbolic.
That's too much. I feel for him a little bit, not because I don't rate him as a goalkeeper, and I haven't rated him as a goalkeeper, but I think this was a combination of the tactical setup being poor against a team like City, who can easily get in behind. That's what they do. They were probably licking their lips when they saw us playing this high line, and his own poor decision-making and poor play. Early on in the game, Marmouche is barely offside when he finishes off the rebound that Bob could have easily caught and spilled, right? And that was your first warning sign to go, Bob might not be on it today. This might be a tough one. And then obviously, the first goal goes in, Madueke at fault for holding everyone onside. So the blame is shared for that one. The second goal simply is ridiculous. It is absolutely absurd that he thinks that he is going to outrace Erling Haaland to get to a ball outside of the box that Trev Chalobah is trying to keep up with. And it's just, he is both not good enough, and the tactical setup today, Sam, was so poor and played into City's hands that he might not have had a chance even if he was on it. And I think both things can be true.
Yeah, I think in terms of the argument, I completely agree with Nick, because I think it just sums up Sanchez's time here. That I think early on in the first half, I was watching his passing and saying he's actually doing really well. Some of his passes that he pinged in the first half to break the press were sensational. And I was optimistic that this is where the tide turns. And there was this one moment in the first half where he collected the ball and he threw it straight to a City player. And Trev Chalobah basically turned back and barked at him, saying, "What?" Yeah, yelled at him, saying, "Why did you do that?" And that was the end of it. I didn't see a single good decision after his, sort of getting yelled at by Trev after that. And that just tells you how frail confidence is. And after that, the error happened. So you do empathize with him. That is, in a defensive setup where nothing's going right, where a lot of defensive errors happen. Um, it is hard to be a goalkeeper, definitely like an easy scapegoat, but there's also no escaping the fact that out of 2,500 players in Europe's top five leagues, he's number one for errors leading to shots, and he's number one for errors leading to goals. And there is no escaping that, my friend.
Number one.
We did it. We're first at something.
Kepa's ghost still haunts, the poles there. But my God, yeah, it's just I do feel for him because I've been there. I've played the position to a relatively high level in my university days, but yeah, it's just horrible to be in that position. But he's not good enough. Genuinely isn't good enough.
I do take the points here in the comments, guys, that like Colwell and Trev were, I think mostly, especially in the second half, very poor. They, again, tactical setup be damned. I don't think that it was the right setup for them, and they really did have struggles in the second half. A couple of balls that were played over the top that they just couldn't get a handle on. And, I don't think that these are real comments here, but, I think that this is a moment for us to look at and go, why this setup today? Like you think about this game last year, wearing the shirt that I'm wearing right now, and it was a hard-nosed, buckle down, play on the counter, let City have all the meaningless possession that they want and just try and gut it out. And we did. And we were winning that game until a very late Rodri equalizer, right? And that was a game that, you know, we took a lot of pride from, right? Because we're clearly, you know, at this stage last season, we're not at City's level, and we were just kind of toughing it out. And we've lost against them twice this year playing dumb tactics. And the first game of the season, you know, Dan and I watched that in New York together. You can forgive that one. It's the first game of the season. We didn't have our squad set up, whatever. This game is harder for me to accept, because if anyone should know how Pep wants to play, it should be Maresca. And instead of just, you know, I think doing some simple readjustments, which we haven't really seen from him, this was a game where he decided to die on that hill of trying to play possession ball, and we got absolutely cooked for it after the first 20 minutes.
I mean, you look at some of the maybe just overall stats for the game. So they had Manchester, they had 2.70 expected goals on the day to the 1.61 for Chelsea. They had 6 big chances, though, to our 2. Again, you think about it, expected goals is accumulation, the number of shots. Some have better numbers than others. 6 big chances is like a 0.3 or higher. So like that is very, very good in terms of the quality of shots they're taking. We had 10 total shots. They had 15. 3 goalkeeper saves a piece. Just, you know, I mean, some of it, when you look at those individuals that you would count upon, rely upon in those moments to contribute, to be successful, just looking at the SOFA score one, and we can kind of get into maybe the performance of the attackers here, Sam. You know, 6.3 for Jadon Sancho, and a 6.8 for Cole Palmer, a 7.0 for Madueke, a 7.5 for Nico Jackson. You know, I think Nico and Madueke end up benefiting from the goal and assists within their kind of total overall ratings. But you had Cole Palmer with a single shot in this game. I mean, you had Jadon Sancho with a single shot in this game. We talked about wanting to see him shoot more from the wings. You had Nico Jackson with 2 shots. You had Madueke with 2 shots. Like, of those groupings, one of them probably needs to be able to take the game by the scruff of the neck and assert themselves more. 2 shots, 3 shots, you know, 1s to 2s, 2s to 3, to really start to accumulate and create high volumes of shots that also then generate high opportunities. And we just didn't find the right setting or matchup. Like, where are you assessing the continued struggle of this attacking group to create the volume of shots and chances that we need to really be successful over a full 90 minutes?
Yeah, I think my key narrative here lies somewhere completely different. Because if I look at the first half here against City, I think at that point in time, after the first 45, it already conceded 2.08 XG. 4 of those 6 big chances came in the first half, and it was 1-1. And at that point, you have already sort of weathered the storm, and you essentially have to just find a way to get back into the game, figure out what to do. The second half, we actually inched possession. We actually had 51% of the ball, and City had only 2 big chances. Their XG was 0.62, but they ended up scoring 2 goals, and we know the kind of goals that they conceded. I think, Dan, at this point in time, when you want to look at the narrative, you should be looking at we've conceded 11 goals in the first half of games, and we've conceded 23 in the second half of games. And when the disparity is that big, then something is going wrong. Palmer was non-existent in the second half. He's fading physically as quickly as I can see it. The same goes for a lot of attackers. I don't know whether he's making subs too late, whether there's just a conditioning issue. We just can't keep up in second half of games. It's just easy to pick us off on the break. Players can't retreat properly. We start making errors. Those are all classic signs of just fatigue and not being able to cope. So is there a deeper issue here? You know, after Pochettino's like regime, where everybody said like you're working them too hard. We look supremely fit, but we're just basically like making trips to the hospital every week. At least we sort of found that 4-3 win against Manchester United. We found those moments to come in, and even the Palace game where like Gallagher popped up with key goals. We did that regularly through the season. This season, the moment we go down in the second half, it's a dead game. There's absolutely no coming back. And I think there's a sense of inevitability, which makes it really, really hard to cope against. So that's my narrative here. Horrible second halves.
Nick, I mean, I think that maybe just is like the confidence question right now. If this, man, and I kind of feel the way that Sam does here. want to see if you feel the same way too. If this Chelsea team goes down, what's your confidence level on maybe on a percentage that Chelsea can come back and draw or win a game?
30%. I mean,
for both a draw and a win. Like,
yeah,
I mean, I feel like my win is like 0 and my draw is like maybe a little higher.
I just, you know, I don't know what it is. I'm trying to figure out like why some of the fight that we saw, particularly at the end of last season, hasn't shown up this year. And, you know, it's a lot of the same guys, a lot of the same players in this team. Maybe we're missing Gallagher, and Gallagher was the reason, which I don't think is true. But it's a lot of the same guys, and it just looks like their posture and body language just drops, and their heads drop, and instead of remaining composed and going, hey, we got this, we can go again, we can do this, it starts to be panic ball. You start to hit ball, a long ball out to someone who's should be there and isn't because they made a different run, or you do get in behind on a City defender, and then you cut the ball back and no one's there, in a normal sort of passing pattern. And I did tweet this after the game that, to me, it's clear that we are still a year or two off, and some very important squad turnover from really challenging in the PL. It's a mentality thing. It's a performance consistency thing. And third, of course, it's a finishing thing. Chelsea have the opportunity to go 2-3 up early in this game, potentially seal it, right? Be the flat track bullies that we know that we are. And instead we don't. And we screw up those opportunities. And Palmer screws up a pass to Nico that, he has to stretch for and can't get a really easy shot on target. And from that point, literally that point in the game, Chelsea dropped everything, dropped the performance, dropped the mentality, everything. And I mean, you'd have to bring in a sports psychologist to figure out what that's about, because I'm not qualified to talk about that. It's very easy to see. Like, if you're watching these games, I challenge everyone watching these games to just pick out the moments, right? Something doesn't go our way. And it's from that moment where the performance drops.
Sam, with the view towards the fact that, by the time this, we're recording this on the 25th of January, but the 26th or 27th, when people listen to this in their podcast feeds, with days and hours left of the transfer window, to try to do anything to plug a ship that has seemed to develop some holes and is taking on some water, as we try to stay afloat with a dream, hope, or aspiration of some type of European competition, hopefully the best next season and not the second or third choice options. How is this performance, or has anything changed in what you were hoping the club and the sporting directors need to do? Because I think, as much as we're talking about Sanchez, we're talking about Maresca, and there's also finger pointing that it can occur and blame that can be laid at the feet of the sporting directors to say, hey, this squad is maybe not constructed the right way to be able to excel in the Premier League. Maybe they're not able to excel across multiple competitions at the same time. Maybe the step down from your first choice option is not strong enough as your second choice option. And so there's a massive delta between option A and option B, where option A is the best. And then option B is really actually option like F. So anything that maybe has changed in your mind as to what could or should the club do between now and the 31st of January to try and do anything to either help improve the squad or to get players in the right position?
And the $1 million question, to be honest, I don't think you should make any impulsive buys or decisions in January, except if it feels like you get your starting lone player back and provide some key depth to, two guys who are from South America will have to travel multiple times across continents, will have to basically run themselves to the ground because we have no other depth left. then yes, kindly do so. I don't care if it's Ugochukwu. Obviously, he hasn't developed as much as we'd like to. So you ideally keep him on loan there. But if you can get Andre Santos, even if he's not ready, give him the 6 months required to acclimatize for next season and get yourself some crucial depth. That would be the easiest thing that you can do in terms of a decision. And the other stuff is something that you have to grin and bear it, like not buying a center forward, not going for Duran or Samu as hard as you could, not having any creative depth for Cole Palmer, because the moment he stops performing, it looks like the circus lost essentially its starting act. So where do you go from there? It generally feels like a expensively assembled team with a couple of talismans, and when those two guys don't work, then the rest crumbles. So that reputation has to change, but I don't think it changes in January.
I mean,
It's like we're in a vice grip, right, Nick? Like there's like, and we just like, you can't get out. You've been boxed into bad decisions, and you actually can't escape the box at the moment.
no, and I think the question, we'll post transfer window, have no fear. We will do a full analysis of the windows that these sporting directors have had and rate them and go through each individual player they've signed and grade out and do our best job to kind of bring the total picture to bear, because I think it's difficult in these moments, right, to say, hey, this one player would make a world of difference in a game that you lost 3-1 away at City. But I mean, it's very clear what Sam just said. Like, Lavi is going to be out till March. You have two midfielders who both have World Cup qualifying coming up, right? Who are going to be a part of the Common Bowl qualifiers, who are going to have long flights back. And you have a guy who just scored again for Strasbourg, who could easily do the job. Yes, I know Liga and the Premier League are miles apart in terms of quality. I don't care. You have to bring him back. It is clear through the substitutions that Maresca hasn't made in midfield that he does not trust anyone else to do this job. And so if that is the case, I don't know what else to tell you. If playing, Kieran Dewsbury Hall, against Wolves was, the signifier that, hey, we need some depth in this team, the sporting directors have to do the smart thing and respond and with help. Because I tweeted this last night, and I remain stuck on this, because N'Golo Kante is probably my favorite player of all time. The way that Sarri misused him and stretched him beyond his limits, played him hurt in that season, potentially ruined his career. And if we have to do that, if this team, this sporting structure decides to do that to Caicedo, it will be the most avoidable calamity of all time. It literally you cannot waste a player of that quality because you just simply decided to not have depth to spell. I genuinely, it will frustrate me to the end of time if they choose to do that. And then that will be kind of the nail in the coffin for me.
As we talk about the structure, we made some comments about just Maresca's management and, how he involves himself in the game. Does he make subs early enough? Does he, get involved appropriately at the right times? When we saw the first sub of the game, the 61st minute, where he brings on Nkunku for Jackson, and Nkunku gets 0 shots from the 61st minute until the end of the match. So really not necessarily getting deployed in a situation to do anything of note. You get in the 73rd minute, you get Reece James out from El Augusto, and you get Pedro Neto on for Sancho. I mean, I think it is fair at this point, Sam, for people who have had questions about Maresca, who have wondered, is he of the caliber? Is he of the level? I know that we are now, 22, 23 games into the season. And so there's maybe enough tape now of him at Chelsea to say, is he showing signs of regression, or is this like who he is? Like, was it just that like he actually did really, really well, but now there's a couple of things, player, lack of availability, the recruitment, where he's doing enough actually to set the team up to be successful, and maybe his in-game, strategy struggles. Like, where are you assessing? Because I feel like it's a mix of he does actually seem to put us in a situation to be successful, like in starts. Like we could be up to nothing very early in this game. So actually I think there was a couple of good things, but then you look at when he makes the subs, what they do or don't do, who he chooses to bring off the bench, who he chooses to entrust. I mean, how much are you kind of looking at him right now as at the end of the season? Is it we think we might want to try and see who else is out there, or do we think it is going to be you're going to have to persevere with him as well?
Yeah, that's an intriguing question that would probably require a separate podcast, to be honest. But from
Look, do you just want to
a management
talk about
perspective,
getting beat up by City? Because I'm happy to go back to the 3-1 scoreline and review a horror show with you, but I'm giving you an opportunity to talk about something a little more theory
no,
based.
if I mean, if you remember, I before the season started, just as Maresca was appointed, I wrote a pretty big newsletter dispatch on
I'm
exactly
calling that the
this,
Lions
saying
Blue
that he does
Dispatch. You can
not
sign up
change.
for that free. It's a free weekly newsletter. I would be, remiss not to recommend it as you're talking about it.
Yeah, but yeah. So that is something that I wrote, saying that if Maresca does not change what he did at Leicester, then we're inevitably going to see him get sacked. And the other thing that I sort of like dug in, that he has to adapt. Like last season at Leicester, he also just hit a point, and after that, there was just a landslide where they almost did not make promotion. So just slipped out of like contention almost. And there were some rumors that the players actually got together, senior players like Vardy, and basically pulled them over the line. So he has to dispel those allegations. I think that he's essentially got his hands tied in terms of like a small squad that he has in terms of certain positions. We saw that last season with Pochettino, where the midfield essentially just had a couple of guys. Centre back started getting injured. Badiashile was out. Fofana was out. We were struggling to get depth in, and those same mistakes have happened this time around. So I do believe there is an error from a squad building perspective because those mistakes have been repeated for some reason. And I don't think you're giving your manager the right environment to succeed, but he also has to help himself. I really can't fault him for putting, say, a Jadon Sancho against Matheus Nunes, or Madueke against Josko Guardiola, and then inevitably both those fullbacks end up having exponentially better games than the wingers that were up against them. If you can't show your quality against two players out of possession, then I don't think it's Maresca's fault. You need to be able to show that you were worth that much of money and time. And I don't think Neto has done that. I don't think Madueke has done that. I don't think Sancho has done that up until this point where we had expectations, but he hasn't performed to them. And none of those attackers have except Cole Palmer. So whose fault is that, to be honest? And I think everybody's involved in it.
I think you're dead on there, Sam. Like in this system in particular, we have talked so often about how Maresca needs his wingers to almost overperform, right? Because they're responsible for holding the width and for dropping back and supporting, admittedly kind of a reserved fullback. So we're both in this system, which is a little crazy, and it to me screams that you're not utilizing the talent that you have effectively. We're both, seeing wingers who are underperforming, their capabilities, and I believe that that's the case. And we're not allowing some of our players like Reece James to get in positions to be very dangerous. And, like it to me screams that I understand his principles. I understand what he wants to do, but it screams that perhaps he needs a rethink here, because the system at times has looked good, but against teams who are not afraid of being on the ball and really challenging us on press, and really challenging our wingers to make a move to get by them, we look very pedestrian. And I think it's we'll see kind of how the average performance turns out by the end of the season. Again, it's after a difficult loss, and I don't want to like throw anyone out of contention or whatever, because I just don't think that that's like a fair thing to do. But when you look at what we have so far, we need much more from these wingers than we're getting. And outside of Madueke's one moment today, I thought he was very poor. Neto comes on very poor. Sancho just hasn't done that much. And, this is kind of where we land because you now Mykhailo Mudryk, Dan, who's out for undetermined period of time, and both of your number 10s are potentially up for sale. The backup number 10, sorry, not Cole Palmer, obviously, but you have Joao Felix and Nkunku who are rumored to leave any day now. What do you do?
Yeah, and I mean, maybe just thoughts with Joao Felix's family, because he obviously had a bereavement pass on this game today.
Correct.
Too, so he was not available for selection contention in this match, but is rumored to be someone who is potentially garnering interest from other teams. And Nkunku has been someone that Bayern Munich has been linked with the majority of the window, and away from Chelsea at some point, either in this transfer window or in the summer. And so maybe this comes down to if you're thinking about how good or not good the squad is at this given time, I think it's a trust question. How many players can Maresca and actually trust in this moment? And it is single digit in my mind, in terms of who he can actually trust across the pitch to go out and to either deliver a at the level or above the level experience, and to be a leader on the pitch, which tells you look at that Manchester City side today, and even though they've been built over many years of very strong recruitment, I would trust Silva on their side a lot more than I would trust multiple players on our side to be involved in making a change in this match. Phil Foden has returned to strong form from them there. Gundogan actually had a pretty strong game for them too. Gvardiol had a really strong performance in this match. If you're thinking about the number of players in this squad at the moment, Sam, who you think are trusted individuals, how many is that? If you take maybe just a little bit of recent form, because I think you would argue Cole Palmer's a trusted player who's in a bad slump of form at the moment, potentially playing a little injured. But you would say, on a given day, you would trust him. We've seen Reece James come back into fitness, and maybe he's another person you point to say we would trust Reece James. But how many of the players would we trust in the Premier League day in, day out?
If I'm being quite critical with the tone of the match, I'd probably say three. Three. And if I'm being generous, I would stretch it to five. I'd probably say just about half. I'm counting Caicedo in there because I think he's been largely very reliable for us. Not had the help he's needed. I think with a very athletic midfield partner, he could probably get even better, maybe save his legs and be more effective. Enzo recently has been quite good. For the large part, he's not been great, but this season at least he's picked up a little bit. Cucurella also, we talked about him being in the reckoning for player of the season, so I would say he's there. Reece James and Cole Palmer, so I would say those five. Nico's stock I think has dropped a little bit in terms of the form guide, so half the team I would say is just about reliable. And even Cole's dropped off quite a bit after the injury, after the knock he had on his ankle. I think that's affecting him physically. But also the fact that this is something that Keir Doyle, who's also a friend of the pod, said that this is probably the first time that Nicholas Jackson and Cole Palmer have played this level of games one after the other in their senior careers. And Palmer, for example, just had less than a week before he got back to the gym and came back to the new season because of the Euros. So it's just been relentless for him. He might not have played at the tournament, but just the travel, just being involved now is a completely new physical realm that he hasn't really hit. And it's the same for a lot of young players. So maybe that's come into play where they haven't really coped well physically, but that's a problem in general, Dan. I think you hit the nail on the head saying you spent 200 million on centre backs and your final back three out of the four is a Cobham pairing that cost you nothing. You spent about 250 million on wingers. None of them have really cemented their spot. So who's to blame? Is Maresca to blame for not getting the best out of them, or the guys making the decisions on top that are to blame for them? And I think there's only There's only so much blame you can attach to the manager.
Are you in the same boat, Nick, in terms of the 3-5 players, in terms of your trust or confidence level in them to go out and be, successful within this team, to be players that you would want to build the team around too?
Oh, okay. Those are two different questions, right?
I know I took it one level
Yeah.
deeper because I
Okay.
figured, Sam got us on a good base there, but I want to go, I want to add some calories to this one.
Yeah. Well, calories you did add. I mean, look, I think that the trust piece for right now, like in this moment, is different than it might look across the entirety of the season. So there might be players who come back in, might be players who exit, right? Um, I think if I were to say players you want to build around, I mean Palmer, of course, no doubt. Caicedo, of course, no doubt. Do you build around Reese with his injury record? A real question. Is there a center back that you would build around on current form? I don't think so. You can't trust Wes's injury record, or I don't think Levi's been phenomenal this year, to be candid, and Chalaba clearly isn't in the long-term plans, so that's a thing. You obviously don't trust a goalkeeper. You might trust Cucurella, but who knows if this is just a system fit or not. I don't trust any of the wingers. I think I like Nicholas Jackson a lot, and I've stood on that hill, but I understand why people are off of that hill too. I'm not afraid to talk about his dip in form. It's pretty bleak, man. I don't know. I think there's clearly players here. We clearly have some players, but for if I'm building a squad, I'm building a squad to win the Champions League and the Premier League. And right now, I think you have 3 or 4, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, even questions in the comments about do we build around Enzo, right? Enzo is someone that we signed for big dollars in a January window, and we thought that he was going to come in post World Cup and be a very transformative player for us. And I think, as Sam highlighted earlier, has had a pretty strong season relative to prior seasons for Chelsea. But even then, it started off a little rough, had, I think, a blazing hot, 9-10 match run, and then has had some mixed performances since then. And so there's a reliability standpoint, how well can they replicate that performance again and again and again? I think the winger group, I mean, you wouldn't build around any one of them. You would not build around Jadon Sancho as the guy, Nani Madueke, who's again contributed more this year than he has in any Chelsea season for him. So hats off to him for kind of his performances, over the course of the season. But still, in terms of should he be a part of the grouping, or should he be your start, a true starter?
So here's your problem with the winger group. If I'm doing my math correctly, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong.
Math Nick always makes an appearance on a math review like this.
It's bleak times when Math Nick shows up. I believe that Mudryk, take the collection of them. I think it's 190 million pounds that you spent on wingers. Something to that effect, close-ish, even if it's not the perfect number.
We'll give you a 20 million pound on either side option.
Fair enough. Okay. And you're not taking any of them. 190 million pounds. And I do think that this, if you're going to take one of them, it's probably Madueke.
Yeah.
He's the most productive of them so far.
He's not the first one you would move away from, right? He's not the first one you would move off on. You would move off on others first.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, obviously the obvious answer for that, but Sam, you said Estevao, who's coming in, and Kendry's obviously coming in, stuff like that. They haven't played one minute of Premier League football yet. We don't really know.
Doesn't that sum it up? My hope lies elsewhere.
but right. I mean, but this is kind of the point, which is it's not only that Chelsea have bought low-priced young talent and hope that they have will come good at some point, right? It's that Chelsea spent 60 million pounds on Pedro Neto this summer. They spent 70 or 80 or 60 million pounds, however you look at the Mudryk contract, and for a player who is not going to make it at Chelsea, I don't think. You've spent a lot of money on players who simply, I don't think, are Premier League or Champions League winner material, but you've spent the amount of money that would suggest that they are. And so, and you're looking at building the spine of this team. Cole and Caicedo are great. I love them as players. I think they're both fantastic. I think that Nico could be fantastic. I think Levi could be fantastic, but they're not there yet. They're not the finished article. They're both too young. And so you really look at it, Sam, and I don't know how long it takes. I think we're a couple of years off. Maybe we're more than a couple of years off.
I mean, Nick, this is probably just an exercise that I'd love to give everybody in the comments and everybody listening to the podcast. Just compare the amount of players in Liverpool's front line that have scored, at least in their career, in any league, about, say, 12 goal or assist contributions in any league. 12 or more, because that is what Maresca needs in terms of returns.
Yep.
Jackson hasn't done it. Palmer didn't do it until he joined us. Madueke has done it once. Neto hasn't done. He has hit 11 twice. He hasn't crossed it. While Liverpool, every single player has. Gakpo has. Salah has. Even Darwin Nunez has. So if you're looking, when Nick says who could be good, that could really disturbs me, because you shouldn't be spending 260 million on goods. You should be spending at least a little bit on reliable, absolutely definitive goals, and that's what we don't have. We are sort of in this process where we are Borussia Dortmund. We are sort of cultivating players for God knows, maybe a club one tier above us, or we're just waiting for them to just sprout and then nurture themselves into global superstars. And not every player will come off like that. So you're just spending half your time trying to find that mystical player from a group of young wonder kids, and I don't know if that's a feasible strategy long term. So that's what scares me. Liverpool have gone out and said, Darwin Nunez, 315 goal assist contributions. There is a chance he comes good. Let's take that chance. Luis Diaz has scored in the Portuguese league, 12, 13 goal contributions. Let's take a bet on him. I think that's where the strategy needs to change, at least when it comes to golden assists.
So as we're recording and live streaming, the quotes from Maresca have come out, and I think they are going to receive some criticism.
It's not what you hope for, Dan, I think is the thing.
No, let me hit you with a couple. One comment. We are making progress. We are better than 1 or 2 months ago. Hard disagree. These moments will make us better. The game started very well for us. We scored the first one and could have scored the second goal 2 or 3 times. The game would have completely changed. Full agree. That is a very accurate comment. I am going to read the Sanchez quote, even though the people are saying don't read the Sanchez quote in the comments. Robert is the first one to admit he knows he has to do better. Working hard every day is the way to improve. We have to have conversations, try to have conversations with all of them. What do you even mean?
That's just word vomit. Those are words in a sentence technically, which is, good.
To quote my boomer friends, Delulu is not the Solulu. Generally comes off as he's lost his complete mind. But yeah, I mean, so have all of us. So can't really blame him for spouting bullshit.
A few more quotes from him here. We started exactly the way we prepared. We could have scored the second one. I'm completely sure if we scored the second one, the game completely changes. Again, we agree with that one. He went with the high pressing. You have to be brave in these games. I think we deal with it for the most parts in games quite well. Would potentially disagree when you have players playing people on side and it's attackers versus the defenders that you would hope would be individuals back there.
There's nothing like saying we do the job mostly well. It's like if you're a surgeon and you're like, hey, I mean, I mostly, suture up those wounds when they're most. I'm mostly
the guts
good.
are still spilling out, but at least I got rid of everything else that I need to take care of.
Guys, I mean, come on, what are we talking about? 70% is great.
He had talked a little bit about on the needing signings. In my opinion, that this was we're a better team than we are 2 months ago. And then he said we could be third, fourth, fifth, or sixth. The important thing is we're focused on trying to improve game after game. I mean, again, mathematically, you could have been any of those things.
You're not.
You just didn't need to give up as many points over the course of December into the start of January, and you would actually not have this issue. And this game wouldn't have a bigger result. Like, don't have the results you did against Everton. Don't have the results you had against Ipswich. Like, you had multiple opportunities to control your destiny, and like you have at each point not been successful at charting a course that made your life easier. This conversation, this pod we're doing, Sam, is a much different podcast, much different episode. Chelsea had done the work ahead of this, and we still lose this game. You would say, hey, you know what?
Tough
City are
game,
just further
tough
ahead,
result,
further ahead in their recruitment
Yeah.
and their squad building, where they're at, the stability. But we've done enough. We're still in the top four. We're still on track to finish where we need to be this season. You have whittled down your margin to nothing, and now you're on the opposite side looking in for the remainder of the season, where you're going to need some luck from other teams to pull them back down to earth, and you're going to need to overperform the remainder of the season.
I mean, so far the only thing he's been right about is that we're not title contenders, so I'll give him that. But other than that, I think you genuinely have to, like Nick, just made a fantastic point in terms of getting your home game percentages up. I think you absolutely have to be flat track bullies in those games. You have to put in the work. You have to turn your Stamford Bridge into a fortress, which it was in the past, and it isn't right now. So it is going to be tough. I don't think Maresca has any excuses in terms of the players are young or they haven't played together. All of that stuff was done last season. We had
Yeah.
enough time for them to get, acclimatized to the league, to its challenges, to everything else. That is not an excuse anymore. And anything less than top four, I think, is utter failure. You don't want to be the Europa League with a new bomb squad ready to rotate with like three players from God knows which leagues. It's not going to happen. So buckle down and have to absolutely give it our best, and hopefully we're able to do the sort of last 10 game run that we did in the end of last season, because that's what you need from here on for half a season.
I mean, what good team have we beaten this year? Anyone?
What good team have we beaten in the last 3 years? We haven't beaten Arsenal, we haven't beaten Liverpool, we haven't beaten Manchester City for how long, Nick? There was the Sky Sports graphic somewhere, wasn't it?
So it's 11 now.
Zero wins.
It's since Dan and Brandon and I were in Porto that we beat Man City. Now, I'll trade that for anything, but like it was
real disrespect on Shamrock Rovers here. Really, just I'm not a stand for this erasure.
We haven't beaten a good team this year, guys. Not one. And if you
Newcastle at 2-1 was probably the best.
That's the best result, but they were not good when we played them. They
were not, but you're saying like, if you're looking at just like who are the good teams over the course of the season, and you could even argue that beating Bournemouth 1-0.
No Tottenham.
Where they're now.
Oh yeah. Thank God. I thought you were going to say Tottenham. Don't include Tottenham.
No,
I don't think Tottenham or Newcastle count. Yeah, Tottenham or Newcastle don't count. For me, like they're outside the traditional, I would say, the teams that we are trying to sort of make up the ground on. So either you give me Arsenal, you give me Newcastle, or Liverpool, or you give me Manchester City, or you don't give me anything at all. And we haven't come close to those teams.
No, we're not close. I mean, I just look at this and I go, again, you got to win 75% of your home games and at least split on the road to get to that magical 70-ish points mark. 70-ish points will definitely secure you Champions League football, I think, this season in particular, because there's going to be some beating up of your Forests and your Bournemouths and your Newcastles and such on the way into the final stretch here. Of that, I have no doubt. But the math is the math, guys. Like you gotta get to somewhere around 70 points to achieve even top 5. I would take 5th if it got us Champions League. I'd be very happy with that because I think it would mean some progression year over year. But I am not confident in that. I predicted 7th at the start of the season. I looked like a fool for the first 4 months of the year. Does it look foolish now?
Regression to Nick's mean has happened on this one.
I
Look,
don't like
Same.
it, but like we're here. This is where we are now. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so I know we're
And
all
yeah, I mean,
clamoring for.
it does look like
Oh,
a sorry season, doesn't it? Where we're going like towards fourth and we end up with the European trophy. So at least like I hope that part comes true where we win the Conference League. But again, that's just hitting expectations. You're in a tournament which is way like the standard is way below your teams.
way
And
below.
if you're going to play like this, then I don't know if you can beat like the Fiorentinas or the upper level clubs that you want to come up against. So hopefully there's a European trophy, complete the set, but you have to finish fifth or fourth, get Champions League, and then serious questions need to be asked in the summer.
Yep.
so with that in mind, I know we're all clamoring for Andre Santos to come back. We'll see if that may or may not happen. It feels less likely, more than likely at this point in time. We've seen the news of Garnacho as being someone that Chelsea are interested in, which gives me a little bit more than a bit of pause in terms of a recruitment situation. And yeah, it doesn't feel like we're going to solve a lot of problems in the transfer window over the next couple of days. So I don't know how you're feeling, Nick, but it feels like we're going to. The plane never took off. Now, I can't say we're even landing the plane because you have to actually get the plane into the air to say that you then have landed it appropriately.
No, I mean you're 6 days as of this recording, so really 5 days by the time things settle in here, and you're either going to do one of two things because January is such a bad market and bad time to buy players. You're either going to stretch for a player to try and salvage one of the key positions that you need, whether that is striker or probably not goalkeeper or midfield, or you're not going to do something and live with what you have and pray to God that everyone stays healthy. I mean, these are pretty much the only solutions. They have not. I will be genuinely shocked if they bring Andre Santos back, despite me clamoring for it since September. I just don't see it happening. I don't see Leslie coming back at this point. And so you're going to play the last 4 months of the season with one fit real midfielder, and the rest being number eights who may or may not play in those positions. So Godspeed. We'll figure it out.
Well, look, we'll have tons of more content going into the transfer window, both in the days remaining, and then afterwards to take a look at how Chelsea are situated, potentially or potentially not, to finish out the season, hopefully in a much stronger form than they are right now. But that's going to do it for this live stream. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for getting involved in the comments. If you're listening back afterwards, leave a 5-star review in the Apple Podcast and Spotify. We always appreciate that. And then, Nick, you've got one final word.
One plug, if you are still interested in coming to London with us, we're doing a deadline.
Chelsea will still be a Premier League football club at that time. We can promise that at least.
Yeah. Hey, January 31st. If you have any questions about the trip or you have anything that you would like XL Tours to accommodate for your trip, please email us, contact@londonisbluepodcast.com, and we will take care of that for you. But just wanted to get that in 1 week.
Yeah, and that's going to do it for this one. So make sure to give us follows, likes, all those wonderful things. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you so much to Sam. And thank you so much for getting involved and being along with this on a little bit of a sad live stream because it was not a Chelsea win. So until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.